But there was a certain intent here with a reckoning about the United States, this exceptional country that we believe it to be, with good reason,
With good
and
reason.
that the United States ought to be seen, perhaps, in terms of its history, in some darker colors and more hues of, shall we say, consternation and things that would trouble us deeply.
That's exactly right. And you've put it so eloquently. I think that, Americans have hid in so many times and periods behind that sense of exceptionalism, that here we were inventing for the first time the notion that people could govern themselves, that all men were created equal, that we are a nation of immigrants. But, our history doesn't always prove that. And in the case of this story, we see it as we had no idea, separated by an ocean and a continent, about what was going on. We then ended fascism and liberated Europe and came across, to our shock, and horror, the concentration camps. And that's when we learned about it. It's just not true, I'm sorry to say. We knew there were 3,000 newspaper articles in 1933 alone. That's the year that Hitler came to power, about discrimination against the Jews. And it only got worse. We knew what was going on. We knew what was happening. And we had a hard time doing something about it. And it's not just what's going on in Europe. It's also that and our pernicious immigration laws that, many good people were trying to push against. It's some of the most famous people in America were out and out anti-Semitic. Henry Ford, bought a newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, and republished the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, the most anti-Semitic tract, a Russian hoax from the 19th century. It had the second highest circulation of a newspaper in America. He thought Jews were responsible for the murder of Abraham Lincoln. Charles Lindbergh, the celebrated aviator, became the spokesman of the America First, the largest anti-war movement in the United States, but also virulently anti-Semitic. And a lot of people from the beginning of the 20th century onward were subscribers, and the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act reflected this, of a pseudoscience with absolutely no basis in fact, that saw a hierarchy of races, of ethnicities, of nationalities, that put at the top of that hierarchy the Nordic, white, Protestant, Hitler would say and did say, Aryan people, and who were given, expansive quotas to come into the United States, because Americans, white Protestant Americans, were fearful that they were being replaced, which is something is echoing today, by the wave of immigrants, mostly from Southern and Central Europe, mostly Catholics and Jews, who had come in by the millions between 1870 and 1920, when we had mostly open borders, and they believed everyone else inferior. And so we were in a country that was not disposed to let in anybody, and certainly not disposed to let in refugees, and certainly not Jewish refugees. And that's something that, as you said, we actually have to reckon with. And the story of the US and the Holocaust, time out, the United States has nothing to do with the Holocaust. But unlike those desperate human beings that required a piece of paper, a visa, or a passport to get out of danger, out of harm's way, the ideas needed no such passport. And so they flowed freely between countries. The insanity of eugenics and the evil of anti-Semitism and bigotry and racism and the extermination and isolation of native peoples in this country, all of that is flowing. Hitler admired what we'd done. The extermination of the Indians and the conquering of the Wild West was what he wanted to do in the Wild East. He didn't see the Slavic people as real people, like we didn't see the native people as real people. And so
All the Slavic people would be slaves, essentially. They would
essentially,
be
and
slaves.
basically, he was going to give them the breathing room, the Lebensraum,
Yeah.
that the German people were entitled to. It wasn't enough to take back the Rhineland or to sort of annex Austria and the Sudetenland and then Czechoslovakia. We wanted everything east. He wanted everything east.